Iran just blinked, and it's trying to make sure nobody notices. On the surface, a peace offer, a diplomatic gesture wrapped in the language of reason. Reopen the strait, end the war, save lives. Sounds almost noble. But strip away the diplomatic language, look past the mediators and the midnight flights between Islamabad and Muscat and Moscow, and what you find underneath is not an olive branch. It is a loaded gun pointed directly at the future of the global economy. And the trigger? Nuclear weapons that Tehran swears it isn't building. This is not a peace deal. This is a trap, and Washington knows it. Here is what you need to understand. Tehran didn't blink. It pivoted. In the final days of April 2026, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi quietly carried a new diplomatic proposal through Islamabad, passed first to Pakistani mediators, then relayed to Washington. The offer sounded reasonable on its surface. Reopen the Strait of Hormuz, end the active war, halt the bloodshed. But buried inside this seemingly generous gesture was a calculated trap. Iran wanted nuclear negotiations, the very heart of this entire conflict, pushed off the table entirely, deferred to some vague future stage, with no timeline and no guarantees. Washington saw through it immediately, because here is the brutal geometry of the situation. The moment the United States agrees to lift its naval blockade of Iranian ports, the moment those warships stand down and tankers start flowing again, Tehran gets everything it needs to breathe again. Its frozen $20 billion in assets potentially unlocked. Its oil revenues slowly revived. Its proxy network, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, quietly rearmed and reactivated. And the nuclear program? Exactly where it was before. Untouched, unresolved, with 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity sitting in Iranian facilities, just a short technical step from weapons-grade material. This is what former CIA station chief Dan Hoffman has described as a textbook Iranian delay tactic. Tehran has never negotiated in good faith. Every agreement it has ever approached has been a mechanism to buy time, recover economic strength, and return to a position of leverage. This proposal is no different. The offer doesn't solve the crisis. It simply asks the United States to surrender its most powerful tool, the blockade, in exchange for the promise of future talks that may never actually happen. And President Trump made his position clear in terms that left no room for misinterpretation. He said that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. Not now. Not under any deal that sidesteps enrichment. And when his envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner canceled their planned trip to Islamabad after Araghchi arrived without any substantive concessions on uranium, Trump described Iran's next communication as a much better proposal. He did not elaborate, but the message to Tehran was unmistakable. The Americans are not moving. Meanwhile, the economic clock in Iran is ticking at a devastating pace. Inflation is suffocating the Iranian public. The legendary deepwater terminal at Karg Island, which normally handles 90% of Iran's oil exports, has fallen into a state of paralysis. Storage tanks filled to capacity. Pressure in pipelines building dangerously with nowhere for the oil to go. Ports at Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, and Asaluya have become ghost terminals. Massive ships waiting without movement, without buyers, without future. The human cost inside Iran is already severe. Gasoline prices for ordinary Americans have climbed to over $4 a gallon. For Iranians living through this blockade, the economic pain is orders of magnitude sharper. And yet, the regime's leadership is publicly projecting strength. Iran's Joint Military Command issued warnings over the weekend that if the U.S. continues its naval blockade and what Tehran calls piracy, it will face a strong response. On Revolution Square in Tehran, a billboard reads, "The Strait of Hormuz remains closed." But the military math tells a very different story. Two U.S. aircraft carrier strike groups, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford, are currently positioned in the region. Apache attack helicopters are flying direct patrol missions against Iranian fast attack craft swarms. AI-supported drone networks are digitally fingerprinting every vessel in the strait, tracking acoustic signatures, hull profiles, and thermal signatures simultaneously. Even if a ship switches flags, cuts its transponder, and sails in darkness, the U.S. Navy's system identifies it within 5 nautical miles. The Gulf has become a digital lock that Tehran cannot pick. And Arachi's diplomatic tour this weekend told its own story of isolation. He flew to Muscat and held talks with Oman's Sultan Haitham, reportedly exploring a mechanism that would let Iran collect tolls from vessels passing through Hormuz. He then returned to Islamabad, where Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif received a 50-minute call warning Tehran about ceasefire violations. Then, most revealingly, Arachi flew directly to St. Petersburg and sat across from Vladimir Putin. Because when your proposal is rejected in Islamabad and your Muscat gambit goes nowhere, you fly to Moscow. But even Russia's support this time is a complicated calculation. Putin can offer diplomatic solidarity publicly and verbal backing at the United Nations. What he cannot offer is a way past the U.S. naval wall in Hormuz. And Russia's own war economy is quietly profiting from Iranian oil's absence, Siberian crude filling the gap in markets that would have previously gone to Tehran. The geopolitical irony is brutal. Iran's closest partner on paper is, in practice, one of the quiet beneficiaries of Iran's suffering. At the United Nations Security Council on Monday, U.S. Ambassador Dorothy Shea delivered perhaps the sharpest summary of the American position. She said the strait was not Iran's hostage, not Tehran's bargaining chip, and not a toll road to be taxed by the Revolutionary Guards. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was equally direct. Iran's nuclear ambitions, he said, are the central issue. Any proposal that removes nuclear concessions from the equation is not a deal. It is a delay. A fragile ceasefire remains in effect, unilaterally extended by Trump. But it is a ceasefire built on quicksand. Both sides are still jockeying for position. Iranian fast attack craft continue operating in the strait. The U.S. is tracking 25 to 35 Iran-linked tankers at this moment, in real time, every hour of every day. The world is watching a high-stakes poker game where one side holds all the military cards, and the other is bluffing with an economic strait that is destroying its own people as quickly as it pressures its opponent. The question is not whether Iran's proposal is genuine. It almost certainly isn't. The question is how much longer Tehran can sustain this level of economic devastation before the pressure forces a real concession. Or something far more dangerous erupts in the 21 miles that control the fate of the global economy. The next move belongs to Iran, and the clock is running out.